Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Tuesday. We took off on Monday from Memorial Day. That was taps right there. Kind of a good reminder of what it was all about. That's what those 70 seconds, that's what Memorial Day is supposed to be about. It's not what it was about for a lot of people, including the folks that are in politics. And today we're going to be talking about there's always something there to remind us. If you lost somebody in a foreign conflict, if you lost somebody that served in the military, then you know there's always going to be something there to remind you about them. And if you've lost something in America over the last 5 years, and I think that's most of us, there's always going to be something that pops up and reminds you that it's not over. I keep going back to the same well, not because I like to and not because I want to, but because it appears that we're going to have to re-adjudicate everything that has been done in the last half decade. So we're going to do that. We're going to keep talking about it. And we're going to point out the hypocrisy and the lies. And we're going to hope that we can continue to shine light on the stories of people. It turns out all the same warriors, all the same people that went out there and said, this is wrong, and that our government is overreaching when it came to COVID tyranny, are the same ones that are going to say this is wrong when it comes to malfeasance within the current administration, which is oftentimes a holdover or continuation of the stuff that happened over the last 5 years in the last administration. I want to try to demonstrate some of that stuff today. So it's going to be kind of interesting. We're going to have a mixed bag of information to share with you today. Before we get too started, I got fired up this morning. I got my week started off with Blackout Coffee, and my friends over there are sponsoring this episode. So allow me pull. Here's our little teaser script. Let's do it right there. It's blackoutcoffee.com/KYLE. We run out of the 5-pound bags here. I've got another week or so in it. I realize that a 5-pound bag lasts the Seraphin family about 8 weeks. Figure out how long it takes you to go through something. If you guys want to do one premium product in your life, I don't know, coffee is kind of the thing that we spend money on here. So we've been telling you about Blackout Coffee for a couple of months. We've been telling you that it doesn't let us down. It's not just another coffee brand. They're a company that's built on hard work and grit and American values. Things that our service members can all appreciate. All of you who know what it's like to wake up at 4 a.m. the way I did, going through basic training and all the other trainings around the country. It never is easier. And I did it without coffee back at that time. I probably would have been an interesting troop if I had actually had access to a little bit of caffeine in the morning. It didn't make any sense to me at the time. Folks, they roast every bean in-house. They're packing the orders themselves. They're employing 30 hardworking Americans. They're a company that doesn't do corporate nonsense. You know, the things that we actually thought this country was all about. They give a damn about making a damn good cup of coffee. It's blackoutcoffee.com/KYLE. Support the American dream. Support the kind of people that are going to build a company the right way up, grow naturally without faking it along the way. You can go to blackoutcoffee.com/KYLE. You'll save 20% on those orders. I actually started looking again this weekend because I was considering adding to our stash. I've got about 5 pounds in reserve, and I always feel like it's not quite enough. You never know. That will be one of the things that goes into my survival kit for sure. Again, folks, if you want to check them out, blackoutcoffee.com/KYLE, company that has been supporting us. We really appreciate it. I actually led off my day with a tweet from them because they said, make coffee great again. And I went, yeah, we're doing that here in the Seraphin household. All right, we're going to do the Kyle Seraphin Show great again right now on this Tuesday morning, just after Memorial Day. And I've got a lot of reflections, like I said, a study in contrast, if you will, and a study in the memory of all the things that we cannot forget. Let's get into it right now. And I am a man of my word. I am drinking the coffee right now. Okay, we started off with taps. We started off with a memorial. So let's lead off with a story about Trump marking Memorial Day at Arlington National Cemetery. And as I said, today's going to be a kind of a study in contrast because I want to do some Joe Biden versus Joe Biden spokespeople, a lot of the lies, and we're going to continue to see the results of weaponization and hopefully the fight against those things. If you guys saw our Sunday sit down, which I recommended to you on Memorial Day, if you didn't normally watch the Sunday one, I think it's going to remind you that we're fighting the same fight over and over again, and the same people, turns out, are in that same fight. Let's talk about Memorial Day. Trump did the ceremonial laying of a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier, delivered marks at Arlington National Cemetery, honoring those who died serving the country. He said, quote, "Every day the Republic stands, it's only possible because of those who did what had to be done when duty called. Our debt to them is eternal, and it doesn't diminish with time. It only grows and grows and grows with each passing year. The greatest monument to their courage is not carved in marble or cast in bronze. It's all around us. It's an American nation, 325 million strong." And that's true. And what's quite interesting, and I think was explored in our Sunday sit down, is that you don't have to agree with the way the country is run. You don't have to agree with who is running the country. You don't have to agree with the way that they send our sons and daughters off into war, that many of you and I signed up to go and serve in this country because we wanted to get involved. Even if there were nefarious purposes that were driving it, it doesn't take away from the sacrifice of the people that were involved in it. I've had veterans tell me that they've learned a lot more about it, but it doesn't diminish the original content or purpose for which that they stood up and raised their hand. If you've ever sworn an oath of office of any kind, and you don't get a little bit choked up, it's a lot like saying marriage vows. And I had that moment a couple weeks ago. My wife and I got to, I guess, renew our vows, if you will. We got our marriage blessed in the Catholic Church. So we said our vows, again, 12 years after we had already done that. And we've been married for a long time. It feels like, a decade and change is not a short period of time. And yet my dad was sitting out there listening to it, and he said, that got me a little bit choked up, because when you say something sacred and honorable, and it doesn't matter whether it's marriage vows or your commitment to this country in an oath of office, in civilian or in military service, it should mean something to you. It should move you. It should make your heart change, because you've now laid your honor on the line and said that you're willing to go do something that not everybody does. Not everybody gets married. Not everybody serves this nation and says that they will. A lot of people really screwed us over with that oath, because they accepted it the way that my buddy Steve Friend referred to it as an iPhone terms of service agreement. Those things that you get in a software package, and you just kind of scroll through it, and you get to the bottom, you hit accept, and you don't even know what's in it. There's some people that must rush through these oaths. It actually reminded me, there was a TV show for a while that was called Quantico, and it was actually popular when I was at Quantico, which is great because it gave me this study in contrast. And man, there was so many things about that show that I didn't realize showed you how wrong things were at the FBI. It was probably more realistic than necessary. The craziest thing about the show Quantico is the way that it started off. It started off, and the hero was a female agent, which is problematic for a lot of reasons, and I'm going to show you that later on in this show. Just hold your horses, baby birds. I'm gonna feed you that one for sure. The female agent starts off by boning one of her classmates in a car before she gets to Quantico. Then she rushes to Quantico and gets there just in time to raise her hand and say, "So help me God." She misses the entire oath of office. And that's because she's what? Like a girl boss. She's like this real pretty, brown-skinned, ethnic diversity hire, female special agent badass who's banging rando dudes who just happen to be in her class. And then she comes running in and she skips the entire point of what it was that she was signing up to serve. And then she investigates some bomb or some BS or whatever it is. And people are having like scandalous sexual encounters at Quantico. That's all real, by the way. There's all kinds of scandalous sexual encounters. Every single female in my class, maybe save one. I think there were like 6 to 8 females in my class. And of them, all but one of them were either undergoing a divorce or were engaged in an extramarital affair while they were at the academy. People I didn't even know until afterwards. Really, really wild. In theory, you're supposed to actually do something of honor and value with your time on Earth if you can. It's interesting that Donald Trump also was able to speak to the folks at West Point this weekend. And I like what he has to say. This is the same guy that you heard them perpetuate a myth about him saying suckers and losers, and he didn't like people in the military. I don't know any guy that has served as president that was more like, I feel like people also liked George Bush because he seemed really relatable. But Donald Trump has that same charisma. I know dudes that were SF guys, that one of the proudest things, or one of the things that they always want to show people, is that they were part of his bodyguard detail when they were overseas. People who get close to Donald Trump that were in the military love it. They absolutely love the fact that he was the president. And I don't know anybody that feels the same way about Joe Biden. And yet we were presented that he was somehow the adult in charge and that he was somehow honorable. Of course, everything he did was always about his son. It was always about his family. It was always about his legacy. It was always about his own name. Here's Donald Trump speaking to the folks at West Point, talking about, that thing that should be really a sacred honor to go out and be able to serve, and why you might forego a lucrative career in order to do so. It's nice to see this kind of stuff. And then we're going to go do the study in contrast, of course, because the alternative is the lies from the other side.
Each of you on the field today is among the most talented members of your generation. You could have done anything you wanted. You could have gone anywhere. You could have gone to any school. This is one of the hardest schools to get into. And writing your own ticket to top jobs on Wall Street or Silicon Valley wouldn't be bad, but I think what you're doing is better. Instead of sports teams and spreadsheets and software, you chose a life of service, very important service, instead of stock options. And I do that stuff. It's sort of boring. Honestly, compared to what you're doing, it's real boring. You chose honor and you chose sacrifice. And instead of business suits and dress shoes, you chose muddy boots and fatigues, keeping yourself in shape. Because West Point cadets don't just have the brightest minds, you also have the bravest hearts and the noblest souls. You're amazing people.
Shouldn't that be the thing that we tell our young people to aspire to? I don't think I had the maturity at 18 to figure that out. It took me until I was 27 when I went and finally enlisted, because I realized that that was a calling that I had. We all get there in our own time. But kudos to those. I worked with some unbelievably capable officers, some of whom were academy graduates, some of whom came out of the ROTC programs. World-class studs. Some of the bravest people that have probably ever walked this earth. Some of them who have died serving this nation at very young ages, being incredibly competent and physically capable. Men of violence and discernment, and just the kind of examples that we kind of hope our kids will grow up into. And then you got the contrast, because the left was celebrating somebody else this weekend, and it wasn't necessarily those who have died in service to our country. There's another kind of Memorial Day. It was George Floyd Day. So here's a story coming from NBC News. This is a serious, quote-unquote, news organization with an article entitled, "In 9 minutes and 29 seconds, George Floyd was killed and forever changed this neighborhood." If you guys want to know, that neighborhood I don't think was nice beforehand, and I don't think it's any better off afterwards. The WNBA decided to take a moment. This is yet another sort of irrelevant thing that exists in the world. This is a George Floyd memorial speech, and it's about as impactful as you think it would be. But it does tell you where people are focused. Also, look at these empty stands. Nothing very impressive about that. Just take a minute, just kind of a study in contrast.
Thank you guys for taking a minute to honor the life of George Floyd. George was a father, a brother, and a son. And his life, like every life, held meaning. His death exposed the holes that are still in our justice and criminal institutions today. And his 5-year anniversary reminds us that we must continue the fight against criminal, racial, and social injustices. We cannot stay silent. Every life deserves respect and dignity. Thank you.
What a weird statement. This is a group of people that celebrate abortion, that don't believe that every life involves respect or deserves dignity, and particularly the ones that are most innocent. And then you have this guy, George Floyd, who, of course, I had friends sending me the meme saying, congratulations, 5 years sober. It took the guy dying to be able to do 5 years of being sober. Someone who was involved in robberies, who did violence in his own community, who went after women, who did everything that you would expect would be kind of the worst examples. And he's lionized and he's celebrated. And there's the, on the background here is the Unity Foods. This is the historic George Floyd Memorial parking space. A guy who held a gun to a pregnant woman's belly and took money. Anyhow, the article goes on for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. On May 25th of 2020, Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin pressed his knee and his weight of his body against George Floyd's neck at this very intersection. And as George Floyd called out for his mother in his final words, Chauvin killed him in the streets as people watched. That's not even what happened. The story's not even accurate. It's not even close. But we're going to have to redo the injuries of completely insane people that took over this country. And they did so with two tactics. One was racial division, and the other was fear of a disease that ended up not killing nearly as many people as they claimed. And so that's being readjudicated right now in this very moment. This story is coming from CBS. Who knew that in 2025, as we go into the summer, COVID variant NB181 is hitting the United States? What you should know about the symptoms and new boosters that you can get and the vaccine restrictions. I kid you not, this comes from their Health Watch segment. New cases of COVID-19 variant NB181. Remember, everyone's got to put their virologist back, their hat back on. Linked to a new surge or a large surge in China. Remember, you can't call it the China virus, so there you have it. Again, the story that kicked up in 2020 was that it was racism to describe accurately where the virus supposedly came from. They've been detected in multiple locations across the United States, says the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Earliest cases in the United States date back to late March, early April. Remnants of 2020 were detected through a screening program in airports that is for newly arrived international travelers. Again, the freedom that is America, the fact that we allow people to come into this country, broadly speaking, and we don't limit people, it has consequences. We have a free and open society, so you're going to always end up with things like violence and cultural problems. You're also going to end up with people traveling in and bringing stuff with them. Spokesperson said, so far, too few U.S. sequences have been reported for it to be included in the agency's variant estimate dashboard, so it hasn't quite made it in. In other words, they haven't calculated enough contact in this country for them to actually put it on the dashboard. But that doesn't stop the fear mongering that's coming out of CBS as they go in and start talking about how you should, broadly speaking, go get yourself more shots to solve the problems. I saw a really interesting thread over the weekend as well that was talking about childbirth in America and how of all the developed nations, American women have the worst outcomes in childbirth across all of the developed and first world countries. That's pretty crazy unless you've had kids in this country. I had a reflection, and I'm going to share it. It's on Vigilant Fox's X feed, and I highly recommend you guys go check it out. 8 million people have so far, so it may be something you've already read. But I had this moment where I was thinking about our child, who was born during the COVID insanity. And there's pictures that we have, and it's something we'll always remember. It's up on our little family wall of pictures of the kids when they were babies, when they were first welcomed into the world. And the one with my son, Bodie, my wife and I both had to have a mask. We had it over our chins because we wanted to be able to breathe because we had a new baby, and she had just done an awful lot of work. But she had a really awful experience in the hospital. And then we had our fourth, and it was at home, and she never saw a doctor. She just had a baby like women have for thousands and thousands of years. And isn't that something? Again, all of the things that were old and all of this knowledge that used to be out there, we've tried to throw it away and started anew. And one of the things that I thought we actually handled in this country was racism in a meaningful way. Like when I was a kid, I think racism was almost dead, minus some small pockets that existed, and those were on the outs. And now racism is back in focus, and it's something that we have to talk about. We have to talk about it because it's so important. It has to divide our troops. It has to divide our federal service. It has to divide us in our lives. It has to divide our kids and their experience as students. And it has to divide the way that we give out government contracts. This DEI, this affirmative action discussion, all these things date back to Joe Biden's first time in office when he was doing it in the executive as a vice president, and then got readjudicated again in the last 4 years. So this is an Obama legacy where he's propped it back up. But there was obviously a desire to make this thing relevant. What I do think, though, in this moment, as we actually deal with it, sometimes you actually have to tear open a wound to debride it, to clean it out before it can finally really heal, because there's something in there that's keeping it from healing. I do hope that this tear open and this look into transgender nonsense and the issue with racism once again, which we're going to have to redo the 2020 because they managed to do two things at once. They put COVID out at the same time as we were dealing with like race riots in this country. Maybe in 2025, we can deal with one of them at a time. And I'm seeing this video that came out from this mayor. His name is Brandon Johnson of Chicago. There's two things that are really, really important to me. Number one, he's talking about racial inequity and giving people contracts simply based on the color of their skin, which should be illegal in this country. I thought it was based on everything I've ever read. Of course, that's not the way it works in practice. But the second thing that he says, which is very critical, or he's addressing, is that he has the historically lowest approval ratings of a Chicago mayor. He's a black man in a city that votes for black people to have extraordinary options available to them. And he's overplayed the race card to the point where it's actually going to be his undoing. Kind of interesting. And it made me, of course, go back to the people that have been lying to us. So I'm going to play you a clip of Brandon Johnson talking about these historically prime things. Then he got a chance to go on MSNBC, the propaganda outlet that deals with the left. And of course, Jen Psaki, who used to be the propagandist for Joe Biden. Again, all of these things go full circle. We're going to play a couple of little things, and I'm going to line up an argument on here. And it's also even going to play into Memorial Day, because this woman, Jen Psaki, the best thing is Jen Psaki versus Jen Psaki, or anyone versus anyone in this country. The fun thing about having the internet and all the capabilities that we have today is that we actually can reasonably go back and look into things and say, well, why did this thing happen? Or how dishonest is this person? And can we prove it? And when they can actually look at their own words, the answer is yes, we actually can prove that they have no principles whatsoever. Not like the people that were standing on the field at West Point. These are people who have a history. It goes out there into the world and you can find it. Here's Brandon Johnson talking about how black people need to have special contracts, not because they're the best contract or construction workers, but because they have black skin.
Prime construction contract at O'Hare under my administration is the first black prime construction worker company to have a prime contract anywhere in the United States of America. And that's critical, not just for BOA Construction, but for the lives that he's going to transform because he's hiring them. But it's also critical for other major construction companies or mid-sized construction companies that are black owned to know that there is a mayor who sees them and is going to work hard to ensure that whether you're developing homes, whether you are, looking to help take advantage of the opportunities through aviation, whether it's entrepreneurship to provide a service, that there are resources available for you in the city of Chicago. And one thing that I know for sure that I have to do over these next 2 years, every single dime that our people have been robbed of, I want to make sure that that is returned 2-3-fold. Because
okay, every single dime that our people have had taken away from them, our people being black people in this case, is what I assume he's saying. He's doing racial divides. So he was interviewed about this, and because he got a lot of flack, some of that stuff is completely absurd. He got some flack. So he went on Jen Psaki's, Ginger Gerbil's propaganda situation, and I can't remember what her show is called. The Briefing, because she was the White House briefer, right? She was the press secretary. And she used to do it on an official government paycheck. Now she does it for MSNBC. We covered it the other day. She bombs when it comes to viewership, mostly because she's terrible at doing this stuff. And it's not believable. I've got some really fun Jen Psaki clips that we're going to be playing today as kind of a, it's a revisiting of the last 4 years of lies that we got from the official pulpit, right? Because that's what they consider it. They consider it to be a pulpit. The left considers that the government is their God, and therefore the person who delivers it is giving that sermon of happy lies. Here she is talking to Brandon Johnson, and the answer is not that he should be investigated for doing things that are probably in violation of federal law and considering contracts based on skin color. He thinks Donald Trump should be investigated. Shocker. Total shocker. We're going to just keep doing this thing until we're done with it. Again, we have to debride the wound until it can actually heal.
In response to the investigation, I kind of love this. You said that the DOJ should actually be investigating the Trump administration. You've paid very close attention to this. Clearly, you just referenced it. But talk to me a little bit more about what you've seen in their hiring practices. You referenced country clubs. Clearly, they do not celebrate diversity. They do the opposite. But what else have you seen?
Well, you would be hard-pressed to find someone in the Trump administration that is actually qualified or actually have the skill that is necessary and the background to actually represent the interest of the American people. So when you think about the Department of Education, not qualified. When you think about Health and Human Services, unqualified. Look, the bottom line is this, is that the people of the city of Chicago elected me to speak to their interests. And that's why I've worked to put together and assemble a deeply connected administration that is not only qualified, but reflects the values of the people of Chicago. And we're seeing the great results. Violence is down in the city of Chicago, over 20%. Homicides are down, shootings are down, robberies are down, while at the same time, we're building more affordable homes, 4,000 in the first 2 years of my administration.
That's outstanding. So again, the values of Chicago, which if you guys ever want to go to Hey Jackass, you can see understanding Chicago values. The values are racism, apparently. That's what it's all about. Go figure. I'm not done with this guy. I'm not done with this story here. We're just going to, as our chat just said, just stop the tape right there. That's right. We're going to go and pivot over to one of our sponsors real quick, and then I'm going to give you guys some more Jen Psaki, because we're not going to get enough of her today. For some reason, she's touched the most fun topics, and we're going to be able to use her as an example to explain away so much of what has been going on. So we're going to do that in a sec. Before we do, we'll say thanks to the folks over at Silent. Folks, if you want to shut down Jen Psaki, if you want to have no Jen Psaki, you can just put your phone into a Faraday bag like I've got here. This is my dry bag. The folks over at Silent make an outstanding Faraday product. It is superior to the junk you will find on the Chinesium stuff from Amazon, simply because it works. And that's not always the case. Between government and big tech and corporate America, criminals, anyone could be trying to compromise your privacy. That means accessing your phone with RF frequencies. Maybe you saw the viral video from my friend Ryan Matta over the weekend, where he put an EMF detector on there and found out that he doesn't know anything about science and he doesn't know how phones work. It turns out if you want to shut all that stuff down and lock it all in, you can do so with one of the Silence Faraday products. Also, if you want to go and have a discussion about how phones work and how electricity works, don't do it with people that don't have any background in it. If you want a Faraday product that's going to block all incoming and outgoing signals and shuts them down, makes your devices nearly invisible, they're safe from the outside world, they're safe from hackers, they're safe from anybody being able to exploit where you're at. You can do it with their backpacks, their phone sleeves, their pants even. The signal blocking technology will stop wireless signals to give you peace of mind. It also gives you a moment of silence where your phone just won't ring, which is also nice. You can place it inside the device, you close it, it's very simple and easy. You either do the roll top or the magnetic sleeve. Go silent today at slnt.com/KYLE. We use their products literally every day, and I actually use them when I go into the phone because I don't want people to see where I'm driving to, because I don't want to be caught when I'm in the water without my pistol on me. slnt.com/KYLE. Save yourself 15%. Free shipping on qualified orders. Stay ahead of what's coming. Secure your privacy today. Again, with Silent. The link is in the show description. They were talking about investigations, were they not? They were just talking about the things that exist out there and kind of like reopening and looking into. It reminded me, thankfully, along with NBC, who, in addition to caring about George Floyd, also cared about this one. This story actually comes from ABC. There's an NBC story that's similar, that the FBI is going to go and try to redo the last couple years because they missed a whole bunch of opportunities. Dan Bongino just announced that they're going to go after the pipe bomber case. They're going to reopen it and start from the beginning. That's kind of silly and ridiculous, it seems like, but I guess that's what you have to do. Seems like it was kind of like a slow wait. Wasn't that like a day one priority? They're also going to look into who had the cocaine at the White House, leaked the Dobbs decision. Are we expecting anybody to pay for it? Probably not. You're going to hear a lot about statute of limitations is my guess. But this week, on Thursday, by Friday, with our Friendly Friday, we should have 2 weeks pass from that fateful interview we saw. So it will be, I assume, will be a wash in the wave of transparency that we were promised. So I'm going to hold on for that because I'm looking forward to it. The FBI has decided to reopen or push for more resources on 3 major cases that were garnering high-profile interest and drew the ire of some congressional Republicans. Deputy Director Dan Bongino announced it on Monday, saying that the 2021 pipe bomber case, the cocaine that was found on the 4th of July weekend in 2023, and the leaked landmark Supreme Court decision are all going to be reinvestigated and put into a strong priority. That doesn't mean that anybody else was excited about it. We have this contrast study. We have this contrast in whether or not you can actually use those resources. And we're going to hear a bunch of whataboutism. Like, oh, you were interested in what happened with Hunter Biden and you're interested in crack cocaine or cocaine being found in the White House. What about Trump? Are you guys going to investigate Trump? Because that's what it always pivots to. Here's Jake Tapper being totally fair with Mike Johnson. 2 people I don't really like. Kind of fun to watch. Kind of like watching slugs smash into each other. Let's enjoy this little discussion of whataboutism, and then we'll do some whataboutism where we just play one person against himself.
You oversaw, as Speaker, a congressional investigation into President Biden's ties to his son Hunter's questionable business dealings to enrich him. You seem to think it was your responsibility to look into this sort of thing then.
Yeah, Jake, the big important distinction, the Biden crime family, as they were named, earned that title. Why? Because they used shell companies, fake LLCs, series of what appeared to be money laundering operations, and Hunter Biden, of course, with his difficult past and the corruption in his past, the family on the public dole, or on the president's dole. The president lied about his involvement in the business dealings, all of that. The evidence just piled up. And by the way, at the same time, the evidence of his diminished mental capacity, subject of your book, of course, I wish it had been published a year earlier, because everybody saw it. Everybody saw what was happening. He used the auto pen. And by the way, there's investigations right now going on in the House. Jamie Comer and the Oversight Committee will be investigating the use of the auto pen, when the president's mental capacity declined, and whether all those things are even legally valid now, given the obvious fact that he was not the one making the decisions. It's huge implications from all this. And so
blah, 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 blah. Two people talking about something. What are they talking about? They're saying the fact is that the last 4 years, we don't even know who was running the country. And we also didn't have functional law enforcement doing the things. So they got to go back and re-adjudicate all this stuff. I mean, yeah. Here's Dan Bongino saying it. Bureau's going to pour resources into the Supreme Court case. This is coming from NBC, so everyone's covering it, and they're all really upset about it. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. What makes sense to me is who was doing this investigation? Who was involved in any of these things? What agency? And that's why I keep saying I always have to go back to the well, and the well is my ex-girlfriend was involved so intimately. How much did you ever hear about the FBI? Maybe in the 90s when there was like the McVeigh situation, and you had in Oklahoma City and Ruby Ridge, and this, I remember hearing about the FBI, but they were actually secondary to the ATF. I've never seen the FBI be so front and center in the American people, especially conservative people's like front of mind. So I kept figuring it out. Like, it's like, okay, we have to go back in time to figure out where the problem is. The problem goes back to Barack Obama. It goes back to 9/11, but if we're being honest, like the real turbocharged, like when the cancer really metastasized, it happened in Obama's term. And who was put in there? It was this guy, Jim Comey. And we've seen him pop up of late. He went on a kind of an apology tour, an explanation tour. And why would you not have Jim Comey? First, he can sell some books. Wouldn't you give him an opportunity to excuse his behavior and to poke some holes in what's going on right now? This is a crazy, crazy little exchange with Jen Psaki, talking about the Office of Public Responsibility, or the Office of Public Integrity. Almost every one of these Orwellian nightmare type names out of DOJ, out of FBI, these groups, the Office of Professional Responsibility was used as a weapon, the Office of Public Integrity, the Office of Civil Rights. The Civil Rights Office was used to go after people's civil rights. Like, all these things were used against us. So we're going to have to continue to tear this thing apart and figure out what was the part of government. Weaponized government means it has an outcome, and they use things that should otherwise be useful tools. Here's Jim Comey saying a couple things, and I'm going to play you something that you've probably never heard him say. You had no idea that all of you folks out here that vote Republican, you're actually white supremacy adjacent. That's going to be the second clip. First, he's going to explain why it's bad that Trump is dismantling these weaponized agencies.
One of the things we've seen recently is the dismantling of the Office of Public Integrity, which historically, typically, if people are going to, from the part of the Justice Department, it's the part of the Justice Department supposed to make sure prosecutions of lawmakers aren't political. What do you make of the dismantling of that? They've cut staff, they've tried to cut their role. What does that mean? What should people understand about it?
Well, these are the people who, through decades and decades, have seen every kind of case. And so they're there to make sure that the work, no matter who's in charge in the White House, no matter who the Attorney General is, that the work is done consistently with previous practice and consistent with the law. I know Republicans these days aren't big in thinking about principle or precedent. They're going to be deeply sorry that disappears, because someday there will be a Democratic president and there'll be investigations of Republican office holders. If I'm them, I sure would want these career people in place, making sure that it's done in the right way.
Oh my goodness. Is that not the craziest projection you've ever heard? Someday there'll be a Democrat president and he's going to do things weaponized. That's literally what we just got out of. And the reason why Jim Comey is not someone who can be taken like on his face as an authority about anything despite the fact that he was like a 2020 Harris Biden action figure wearing his mug and his hat and his T-shirt and all that kind of nonsense, and all of the little political snaky things that he's been putting out. Again, he's a guy that referenced that TV show Quantico while I was graduating, and everybody thought it was so clever and funny. And then you're sitting there listening to him, and he's like, yeah, we run around in towels and we're all hanging out. And it's like, well, actually, a lot of that does actually happen. If the guy actually knew what was going on, maybe he actually did. Imagine how long he's had little sentiments like this. Did his brain get cracked by Donald Trump? Or was he always the guy, again, he was quote unquote a Republican that was put in office by Obama. And apparently he thinks this about the Republican Party that he supposedly was a member of.
One of the things that is happening now is that the Trump administration is, of course, testing the system in ways it hasn't been tested before. In the law enforcement sense, do you think there are laws that should be put in place that would help better manage this that aren't in place now? I mean, are we equipped? Is the law enforcement system and the legal system equipped to deal with what we're seeing now?
Probably there could be changes at the margins, but in the main, we have the tools. There are cultural impediments to doing this work. Let's say you work in the FBI. You know that one of the two political parties is, let me put it nicely, white supremacist adjacent at a minimum. And so why would you want to throw your career on that side of the line and be summoned to Capitol Hill to be asked, why are you pursuing these innocent groups? And so we have a cultural impediment to working it effectively that should get more attention than it does.
Yeah, he just called the Republican side of the aisle white supremacy adjacent. This is another story that I just saw. This is coming from ABC News, and it was talking about, like when a Democrat president is in charge, decides to go after political enemies. Trump pardoned a Virginia sheriff convicted of federal bribery charges. This is Sheriff Scott Jenkins, who was reporting to jail today, was given a full and unconditional pardon. That just happened on Monday. So he was still working on Memorial Day. He was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. He was the sheriff of Culpeper County, Virginia, just south of Washington, D.C. He was set to report to jail as of today. And his wife, Patricia, and Trump said Scott Jenkins and his wife, Patricia, and their family have been dragged through hell by a corrupt and weaponized Biden DOJ. In fact, during his trial, Sheriff Jenkins tried to offer exculpatory information to support himself, and a Biden judge, Robert Ballou, whose name we've heard before, refused to allow it, shut him down, and then went on a tirade. Now, I don't know whether or not this guy was actually corrupt, but I do know that the people that were pursuing him couldn't be trusted. And I did work cases out in Culpeper County because it was close enough in there. We worked some drug cases out there. There's some interesting and dangerous things. I think that what this story was always about, because the story was that he was accepting cash for sheriff's badges. That was the claim, that he was getting paid. And it reminded me, I was like, I know this guy's name. I know that I've heard Scott Jenkins before in Culpeper County related to something about deputies and getting badges. And maybe some of you do as well. So we're going to step back in time. And during the sort of chaos that was happening in 2020 with COVID, some people were making some really exceptional claims. They were trying to say that we should limit firearms. We should do a bunch of other things, right? Because the world was dangerous. And when all the people, even on the people on the political left, were starting to go like, man, maybe I should own a gun because it seems like my city is not very safe. Then you were also seeing state legislatures, wherever they had the ability, all of these people were pushing forward. And they said, well, maybe we should take guns from all the people. And I remembered that the Culpeper County Sheriff, Scott Jenkins, was talking about deputizing anybody in the state of Virginia that might lose their right to carry a gun because they weren't a law enforcement officer. He would exempt them by making them reserve deputies. So I went and found this clip. It took me a little bit of work because all of the stories want to talk about his pardon. None of them wanted to talk about this little story from his past. This goes back several years now. And it makes me wonder, was this why he was targeted? Because it's perfectly reasonable that a weaponized government would go after someone that cared about civil liberties.
There are a few that have been filed, but the bill that Culpeper County Sheriff Scott Jenkins says he's concerned with was actually filed last session and rolled over and continued into the 2021 session.
During the 2020 Virginia legislative session, when proposed gun bills were dominating the conversation, Culpeper County Sheriff Scott Jenkins vowed to swear in local citizens as reserve deputies if gun bills he called unconstitutional were passed. One of those bills was Virginia Delegate Mark Levine's bill HB 961, which would ban the future sale and transferring of assault weapons.
It is designed primarily to prevent mass shootings. It doesn't take anyone's current weapon away.
The bill didn't pass last session, but it did continue to the 2021 legislative session.
We said from the beginning, we don't want to have to go down this road of swearing in thousands of citizens and doing this type of thing. But it is something that I have said I will, and I will carry it out.
Jenkins says they've had a strong interest in people wanting to be a reserve deputy, mostly from people who want to secure their right to own guns.
We have had thousands of emails, phone messages, and other personal contact walk-ins with people desiring to start the process now or months past.
This week, the department started recruiting volunteer background investigators to screen potential reserve deputy applicants in the case that gun safety bills like Levine's assault firearms bill does pass. But Virginia Delegate Levine says no guns would be taken away from law-abiding citizens.
Isn't that interesting? A guy who said he was going to step up and swear a bunch of people in was convicted of 4 counts of honest services fraud. Honest services fraud reminds me, too, that this is the same Eastern District of Virginia where they went after honest services fraud against Amy Nelson's husband. And it's almost like these weaponized governments sort of have like this predetermined proposal. They're like, oh, this is a useful tool. We're going to use 18 U.S.C. 1512C, which was overturned in the Fisher decision. We're going to go after people for obstruction, even though we've never done it before. We're going to use something called honest services fraud, which there is no group that investigates that primarily in the FBI. And we're going to go after this guy with it. Just makes me wonder, when the outcome is already predetermined because of who you've chosen to go after. Makes me think. It's why we have to go and do all these things over again. I think. Like I said, it's fun to be able to push these people against themselves. We just got off Memorial Day, so I'm going to give you Jen Psaki lying when she was president. Again, depends on who's in office. Jim Comey just said at some point in time we'll have a Democrat. Republicans should be a little bit wary of it. The problem is that when Democrats are in charge, they act exactly like what they're accusing Republicans of. And I don't think Republicans are. Setting something right with a pardon is not the same as using the government to go after your enemies. Here's that woman, Jen Psaki, who we've featured a couple times so far. I'm going to give you another little taste of her. This is where Jen Psaki versus Jen Psaki bombing out.
The president said today that he was sent here to look out for these working and middle-class families who are strained right now. So what should they read into him leaving now at this time of great personal financial hardship for so many to go to Nantucket for the week?
Well, first I would say, Peter, that I hope you're spending time with your family. I'm spending time with my family, and I hope everybody in here is spending time with their families. This is a time to put politics aside, spend time with your loved ones, and talk about what you're grateful for. I will also tell you from spending some time working for this president and a past president that you are president no matter where you are. He will conduct his work from wherever he is, on any vacation, on any time he is in Delaware, at Camp David, or wherever he may be spending time with his loved ones. He has secure phone capabilities. He has staff traveling with him, and I think the American people can be assured that he will continue to press to lower their costs and ensure they have more breathing room. First, I want to take a moment, though, to talk about a bit about something important, and that's something hopefully you're all experiencing right now, personal time. Hopefully this holiday weekend, you're able to take some of your own personal time to reflect or be with family or friends or barbecuing or going to the pool or whatever you may be doing. If you have kids like me, personal time is very hard to come by. I certainly cherish it. However, there is at least one person who is generally not afforded the privilege of personal time. And that person is the President of the United States, no matter who they are. And before you feel bad for any moment, this is what presidents sign up for, all of them. There are no on or off buttons for national crises or the all-encompassing responsibility of the presidency.
Yeah, she's talking about Donald Trump there. So what a difference it makes. Also, does she really care about family time? Like she's a mom, but she jumped from one job into another job and now she's working for NBC or MSNBC. Kind of interesting to see that. Again, it reminds us just a little bit that these people can't be honest on their best day. And we're going to have to go back and re-adjudicate all the things that they did. We're going to keep doing it. The only upside is I think Americans are actually getting sick of it. And so that's why we have to keep pointing out hypocrisy. That's why we have to keep sharing it with folks, because it does slowly turn the ship. It doesn't happen overnight. But this little story, which I caught, made me think about something this morning. And I got really deep into the weeds on DEI, on racism, and sort of like the leftist sort of push for identity politics, which continues to be the only button they know how to push. And I think it's actually losing. For once, they've actually overplayed the hand, and now it's starting to go backwards. And so this little story here, I'm just going to walk you through a little path coming from a Gallup poll. So this is a Gallup story from 2023. It says Americans say transgender athletes should play for teams that only match the gender at birth. A larger majority, this is 2023, a larger majority of Americans now, at 69%, than in 2021, 62%, say transgender athletes should be allowed to compete on sports teams that conform with their birth gender. In other words, they think that trans women are not women. That's the broadest statement here. 2021, 62% said that it should just be boys and girls sports and they should be segregated by biological sex. In 2023, 69% said it. We can move forward to this, which just came out a couple days ago. And this story says most Americans oppose trans women competing in female sports, including 2 of 3 out of the youngest generation, Gen Z. 75% overall American adults say that trans women should not be allowed to play in female sports. In other words, men shouldn't be allowed in women's sports. So we've gone from 61 or 62 to 69 to 75. It's over and over and over. People are burned out on this stuff. So I'm fine with them continuing to say it. The key is that we have to keep repeating ourselves. It feels like crazy people to say the same thing over and over again. But the fact of the matter is it's actually slowly having that impact to the point where Steve Friend and I always joke about it being an 80-20 situation. We're almost there at the 80-20 situation right now on a couple of fringe issues. And so there was an entire story that was broken up about how the Democrat Party doesn't have any leadership and they don't know what to do. And they're majoring in the minors. They're picking all these like losing issues. But the only way that we can continue to make sure that they are losing issues is by highlighting them, because there are a lot of people that still do not even know that these things are happening. And the same people that push this stuff are the ones that were involved with the movement of our government into a crazy way. Jim Comey, who was the FBI director in Obama's second term, said that Republicans are white supremacy adjacent. Now remember, he's allegedly or was allegedly a Republican while he was nominated. How would you make that radical shift? It's not possible, by the way. It's not possible to go from reasonable center right to completely lunatic leftist talking points without being someone who already had that sympathy. And he did the same thing to that federal agency, which went after people like Amy Nelson, which went after people like me and my family, which went after people apparently like Scott Jenkins. And so even if Scott Jenkins did something that was untoward, I would say it's tainted because of the agency that went after him. We had a guy that went and shot 2 people outside of the Jewish Museum the other day. And he released a manifesto. He put it out on his little social media. Nobody read it. A reporter named Ken Klippenstein went out and found it. And when he did, he was able to report what it said in this manifesto. He literally said, I've obtained the alleged manifesto written by this person, Elias Rodriguez, from Chicago, by the way. We played what his mayor is all about. We know what kind of Chicago values are out there. It's signed and timestamped. He authenticated it as best he can, said, I can't 100% confirm it, but I believe that this is correct. And I'm publishing it not to glorify the violence, which I find abhorrent and I condemn, but so that the public can understand the truth of what happened. In other words, the American people should be able to make their own decisions about information. Share it and let people decide. And so there he shared it. And that immediately resulted in an FBI agent going to his door. Why? It's published. They could send him an email. He has an email that's available. You can reach out to him on Substack. You can reach out to him on X. You could call him up. I'm sure they could find his phone number. Why would you go and knock on the door of a reporter and ask the following questions? Now, some of these questions are not that big of a deal. But the fact of the matter is, and thank God that he did, he said, I'm not going to answer your questions. Go to my attorney. And they said, we'd like to share these questions with your attorney. Please do not share them with the public, which the FBI does not have the ability to do. It shows us that the shine is completely gone. So the 11 questions were, when did he first encounter the manifesto? How did he first encounter it? Did he receive any instructions from the source of the manifesto on how to disseminate it? These are bad faith questions. That one is for sure. Does the system or platform that he received the manifesto capture metadata? And can they have it? Did he make edits or change the manifesto in any way, shape, or form? These are all things that the FBI should be doing on their own. Why did they not find the manifesto? Why did they take a journalist instead of professionals who are going out there and trying to determine this thing? Because you've already heard The deputy director of the FBI referred to this as terrorism right off the bat. And then it turns out that the person who did this is probably really lazy. And I'm going to do it by showing you the female agent who was involved in going out to question Ken Klippenstein. This woman represents, without even knowing her, I don't know anything about her other than what she's presented here. I can tell you that she is the quintessential FBI employee at this point in time. I did an interview that went out last night with Sarah Westall. And one of the things I said is the FBI constantly tells their people that they are the best in the world, that they are the premier law enforcement agency, and no one else has ordained them that except themselves. Yesterday, I got a video texted over to me in a group chat from a friend of mine who used to be an FBI agent and now works back in his local police job. And he said, this is what real law enforcement officers are doing at 3 a.m. on Memorial Day. And he was out videotaping bad guys because he was out doing surveillance the way that cops are supposed to do it. FBI agents, generally speaking, are investigators for long-term stuff, and they're not doing call-outs, and they're not protecting the public. They're doing what this lady is. There's an indoctrination that happens that said, you're the most elite, and you don't have to waste your time with low-level law enforcement, to the point where female FBI agents that were in my class when I was going through Quantico straight up told cops, I have a job that actually matters to the American people. I work in national security. And said it to local cops who deal with violent crime literally every day. And I mean that literally every day. This is that attitude that brings all the nastiest things that we've seen in the last couple of years into grim focus. Racism, sexism, all the things that they think that are the right wing's problem. They come from the left, and they always have. Here is I guarantee you, left-leaning lady who lives in Madison, or thereabouts. She is the person investigating a journalist and running down leads. And here she is talking about why it's so important that we recruit women. Because we need women, we need people who look like us, which might be the most sexist and racist thing you could say. It's going to start with that. I've got another video of her when she was in Albany talking about how you want people that look like you to be able to do the interview. If that's the standard, we're screwed in America. Listen to this craziness. This is why this problem continues to present, like it festers. And you cannot tell me the FBI has been fixed when this lady still has a job.
Women, I think, bring a perspective to the FBI that is different than our male counterparts. And we need to reflect the community we're serving. And if approximately 50% of the country is women, then we should have equal representation.
And while she never doubted herself in being a great special agent, Special Agent Thurmer credits the women who came before her to help her see her full potential.
I was lucky that I worked with many female special agents in my capacity as professional staff.
Okay, so she started off as professional staff. I actually told you this is how the agency got captured. They hired a bunch of people into professional staff, and then they got those people to promote to agent. And as I've said here many times, the best job in the FBI is being an FBI agent, but it's not the best job in the world. They constantly tell people who have never had another job, they come straight out of college, they work for the Bureau, they get themselves into the best job in the FBI, and then they go out and do this. These people are the reason and the way that you go after a local sheriff because he maybe didn't like your position on guns, because they think that the only people who should have guns are people who are law enforcement, aka federal law enforcement only. This is her talking about the importance of diversity. Are you telling me this fight is over? I thought this was all supposed to be over with Trump. The fact is we are fighting so uphill that the entire culture is wrecked. And so as you swear in new people at West Point and you help them understand the importance of what it means to go in and swear that oath, you still have an entire legacy of 20 years of this.
If you think a woman isn't man enough to work in the FBI, Special Agent Ellen Thumer is here to prove you wrong.
Can you believe that you're here? No. And I think that's why I originally didn't think to apply.
Fire!
And speaking of women in the FBI, there's also Janine DiGiuseppe, the special agent in charge for the Albany office.
For me, it's very humbling, and I never thought I'd be an SAC.
They and Supervisory Special Agent Donald Chu know what it takes to join the ranks of one of the most respected federal organizations.
Fire!
But as minorities, they also know they represent much more than just the agency.
It's important for the FBI to reflect the communities we serve.
Sometimes when we go into a community and we want to interview a witness or speak to a victim of a crime, that victim or witness may be reluctant to talk to someone that they feel isn't like them or represent them.
I do feel like I work with some really amazing women. I also feel like there could be more.
Okay. Why do they have to look like you? Aren't human beings human beings? Isn't that the entire point of what this whole national experiment is about? I don't get it. None of that makes any sense to me. But I'm confident that every one of those people there believe it because that's what they've been indoctrinated to believe. And that's how you end up with someone reaching out and making a phone call like this. We're going to play the little voicemail because it was asked not to be shared. So we're going to share it just because that's what I do here.
Hi, Beth. My name is Ellen Thurmer. I'm a special agent with the FBI Milwaukee Division out of the Madison RA. I'm calling in regards to your client, Ken Klipperstein. I was just over at Mr. Klipperstein's residence earlier today, following up on some questions I had regarding the manifesto that he published on his blog yesterday. Mr. Klipperstein recommended that we give you a call or email. And
is it Klipperstein or Klippenstein? Like, which one is it? Because she's having a hard time with it. Is this the kind of thing? Is this the professional? All of this stuff leads to something that's really, really gross and ugly. This is a discussion that was taking place in Texas. So we've gone now from Wisconsin down to Texas. This is ubiquitous across state, local, and federal government, where we have this new idea that's been introduced, and it's been slowly growing. And I do think it's less and less popular, but only as long as we keep talking about it. In the same way that transgender ideology has to be rooted out and you have to share it with people, you have to share this sort of bizarre and subtle racism, the fact that we're trying to go back to segregation right now. Do you guys realize how crazy it is that in 2025, we are now saying that we should have segregated classrooms? This argument is being made at the State House in Austin, just a little bit south of me. Here's a little discussion from a black lady trying to say that people need to look like, not only do you have to have investigators that look like you also should have teachers that look like you. We're going towards 50 or 80 years ago, slowly and stupidly.
Would you agree that research shows that students learn better from people who look like them?
No, I don't agree with that research.
Okay, so you don't agree with that research?
No.
So you're a professional.
Because I'll tell you flat out, my son Landry, who just finished 4th grade, had his best teacher of the. We've had some amazing teachers that look like him. His best teacher ever was this year, and she was Hispanic and looked different than him. And so, no, I do not agree that a student needs a teacher who looks like him or her in order to be an effective teacher.
But you are aware of that research, even though you may not agree with it. You are aware of it.
I strongly disagree with.
I agree. You disagree with it, but you are aware of it.
Yeah, I'm also aware of research that suggests the complete opposite.
The other question that
what are we pushing at this point? It doesn't make any bit of sense. Again, the only way to do it is to keep staying there. We have to keep tearing that Band-Aid off. We have to keep debreeding that wound. We have to keep going back in, pointing out the conflict, the obvious, ridiculous nature of what they've been saying. And a big piece of it is we're going to have to go back and undo all of the wrong that was done. Again, that's going to be a painful and ugly process. And I don't see it being done properly because all the people that were selected by that Jim Comey who thought that you were white supremacy adjacent and were continued on with Andy McCabe and then through Chris Wray and the others that were at the FBI that were doing it at a federal level, all of those things were also getting pushed out to the state and locals. It turned out that Kash Patel actually talked about that was the way that the DOJ and the FBI lean on local authorities to get their same policies. They hold money over them, and they're still doing that. And if you think that the two guys that are sitting up there that people wanted to trust have any grip on folks like this is what the FBI looked like. This is what 20 years in the FBI will give you. It's that lady. It's that special agent in charge who, I swear I've met her. I don't know where I met her, the Giuseppe chick, but I know that I've seen her and met her before. And they're all like that. So many of them are. The senior management all conform to a specific idea. The way that you become the top of the FBI historically, and all the people that are sitting directly underneath Kash and Dan are like this guy. This is Andy McCabe talking about why we needed the 25th Amendment. And look how fawning they were at 60 Minutes talking about what a great guy he was.
You said that people should not.
That's not Andy McCabe. Somehow I got the wrong clip. Where did he go? This must be
obviously his behavior is erratic and unusual do you think there's a case to be made that he's unfit? Fits in with this general theme that there are senior officials in the Trump administration who are trying to protect the country from President Trump's worst impulses. People on the White House staff used to do hashtag TFA, the 25th Amendment, whenever President Trump did anything crazy. This isn't the first time our viewers have heard the term 25th Amendment. They know what it means.
Okay, so that was Jake Tapper doing the thing. I got my clips out of order here. This is the clip I was looking for of Andy McCabe. They started talking about this stuff. Remember, they were all for getting rid of Donald Trump under the 25th Amendment, and then they immediately ignored it in the last 4 years when they had Biden, who actually needed a 25th Amendment to remove him. This is Andy McCabe being super honest and talking to Scott Pelley, who's one of my other favorite people to dislike.
A discussion of the 25th Amendment was simply Rod raised the issue and discussed it with me in the context of thinking about how many other cabinet officials might support such an effort.
What seemed to be coursing through the mind of the Deputy Attorney General was getting rid of the President of the United States.
Well,
one way or another.
I can't confirm that, but what I can say is the Deputy Attorney General was definitely very concerned about the President, about his capacity.
A conversation with Scott Pelley and producer Pat Milton about their 60 Minutes interview with Andrew McCabe, former acting director of the FBI.
We had good reason
so honest
to consider that the president might be a threat to national security. That's why we opened the case we did.
As someone who covered the White House for many years, what was your reaction hearing his descriptions, such vivid descriptions of these conversations?
Oh, it's absolutely astonishing. Imagine the Deputy Attorney General talking about how to remove the President of the United States. One of the investigations that McCabe started is a counterintelligence investigation. In other words, is the President of the United States an agent of Russia?
That's what we in the FBI call the facts that we're aware of that call.
Pat, one of the things that impressed me about McCabe in the interview was how careful he was about what he knew, what he didn't know, and what he had overheard.
They were so impressed that an FBI agent knew how to speak about things from his memory and what things he read, what things were written down, and what things someone said. If that's the standard of how excited you are and how interesting things are, and what an incredible experience to talk to a man who just says things that are precise. That's the minimum standard. What would you expect the alternative to be? Someone who just came in there and winged it? Who just spoke off the top of their head like Jen Psaki does and just said what felt good? That was all, for the last 8 years, an attempt to remove a lawfully elected president, right? By the agency that I used to work at, and the complete capture. And they didn't fire everybody that was involved. They took that oath of office and they just went like, we don't care. Not relevant. We're signing up to serve the FBI, not to serve the American people, the way that Trump was talking about to the folks at West Point. It's a complete cultural destruction, and the only way you fix it is by complete teardown. It makes you know why people like Ed Martin are really dangerous. He said it now in a couple of different interviews. I'm going to play this one more clip to you guys, what I think needs to happen. And the reason why I think that we need to continue to fight to make that happen by bringing that awareness in the same way people did about transgender ideology and moving the needle to now 3 out of 4 people have sanity. Like, it's an overwhelming majority. The same thing has to happen for all levels of our understanding of like how government crazy seeped into these people's heads, that it's about racism and it's not about like doing what makes sense. Here is Ed Martin saying what you can do and what you can't do. What you can't normally do is say the truth and be honest and pursue principle, which is exactly what needs to be done right now if we're going to reclaim it.
What were they so afraid of, Ed Martin, in your confirmation? Real quick.
Look, I'll tell you what they're afraid of. Same thing with Trump. They're afraid of people that aren't going to roll over for what they want, right? If you want a career in the law or you want a career in politics, don't do what I did, because you're going to find yourself opposed by your own party and you're going to be hemmed in on. No big law firm is going to want to hire you. But if you want to do what's right for the country, Donald Trump showed us the way. And I'll finish with this, Annie. I think it's this. I think this is the truth right now. It's now or never. It's now or never for this moment we have where if you're going to be, this isn't a debate about who could be this or who could be that. This isn't a conversation about what the future. It's now or never for our country to keep going and being great and being awesome. And all of us that can have to get in there and understand the moment and go for it as best we can.
Okay, I'm going to wrap up with the fact that the other side actually still doesn't understand what the ask is and what needs to be done. And here's my evidence of it. One of their new rising stars is a son of an FBI agent. His name is David Hogg. He's the same kind of guy that would be totally happy with you getting rid of a local sheriff because of an assault weapon ban that this guy was going to go do an end around on. Here's David Hogg talking to the Breakfast Club, which I don't understand the lure of this particular, but they have a very, very popular radio show. People listen to it. They're talking about someone that they think is a rising star in their party. I encourage it. I want that. Allow the other side to continue to double down on crazy, whether it be about transgender ideology, whether it be about racism in the classroom, whether it be that women are the same and should be carrying guns and going out there. By the way, if you guys didn't see the video, if you were just listening to that agent, Ellen Thermer, who was interviewing or trying to interview Ken Klippenstein, she couldn't find her gun in the holster, which is something I found all the time. The number of people that hadn't touched a firearm before they got to Quantico when I went was a third of my class. Men and women, by the way, mixed bag, but almost all the women had never touched a gun before. And now you want them to go out and be federal agents? I'm for it. I'm going to continue it. Let them push that agenda while regular Americans wake up and go like, David Hogg is a fantastic spokesperson. We should hope that he stays in the Democrat Party as a very, very loud and vocal voice. Here he is talking about Jasmine Crockett being a leader.
Jasmine Crockett, I love her. She is amazing.
Yeah.
I think that people want to see somebody who fights and calls out the bullshit, ultimately. I think that's what Jasmine does, and we need a hell of a lot more people that are out there that are willing to do just that and call people out on their BS and not say, oh my God, Republicans are going to criticize me for saying this. Screw that. They're going to criticize you no matter what. So what we should be asking ourselves is, what are we really fighting for? Yeah. Because we know it matters, and I think Jasmine is frankly the type of leader that we're really looking to support. And
I'm looking to support Jasmine Crockett for whatever role in Democrat leadership that you can get her. She might as well be the perfect solution. Here she is talking about how she's going to go investigate Donald Trump. Remember, they just asked Mike Johnson why he wasn't going to investigate Trump. Apparently, Democrats are going to take the midterms, and then you're going to get Jasmine Crockett in charge of the party. This is what they want. So, like, let them have it. Let's keep calling out. Like, allow them to promote all the crazy. Don't tell them it's a bad idea.
If the Democrats take over after the midterms next year, the House and or Senate, do you think they're going to push for investigations into Trump's family and the whole crypto acquisitions that he is getting?
Well, Alex, I'm glad you asked.
Oh, here we go.
Listen, so long as we end up taking the House, which I fully anticipate that we will do, and we are going to work hard to obviously help our Senate colleagues as well, then as someone who serves on the Oversight Committee and hopes to lead the Oversight Committee, I can guarantee you that we will do what we are supposed to do as constitutionally sworn members of the House, which means that we will conduct oversight. That means that we will investigate. We will look at whether or not this president himself has violated the emoluments clause as it relates to, say, such things as getting a $400 million plane from the Qataris. We also will make sure that we're looking into all these business deals that they have going on. I mean, think about it this way, Alex. They were going after Hunter because he sat on a board. Think about how much money they are raking in, whether we're talking about the next golf resort that they're setting up in Qatar, or whether we're talking about them leveling Gaza, as they've talked about, and talked about how it would be great beachfront property, whether we're talking about this crypto scam, the scam that people didn't even want to walk into and show their faces. Let me tell you, there is no shortage of things for us to dig into and determine whether or not there have been not only violations of the law, but definitely violations of our Constitution as a whole.
Yeah, let her be in charge of things. And as just a reminder, FBI agents were the ones who covered up what happened in 2020. And the FBI agents didn't even know. The ones that I work with didn't even know that there was a Biden laptop that was released in October, which should have changed the game. I think God draws straight with crooked lines. I think that we dodged a bullet by not having 2 back-to-back terms of Donald Trump being completely obfuscated over and over again. And what we had a chance to do is see the festering wound that is out there, the racism and the sexism and the retarded sort of nature of our government as it was weaponized against us under Joe Biden and whoever the hell was actually running things. And this is just yet another reminder. If you guys have not seen this, this is a piece that came from Miranda Devine. It says on the eve of the 2020 election, FBI agents discussed an active money laundering case against Hunter Biden. Remember, Jasmine Crockett thinks that was no big deal. Just hours after casting doubt on the authenticity of the incriminating laptop during meetings with social media companies, Chuck Grassley just got the redacted chat logs, the FBI's refusal to confirm the laptop's resistance, and instead allowed a false narrative to take hold that it was Russian disinformation. Again, the FBI was involved in overthrowing an election. And it was probably trying to do the same thing with Jim Comey. He probably thought he was actually helping Hillary Clinton, based on what you just heard him say earlier today. It has been such a dirty and corrupt thing. There's always something here that reminds me of what I left and how bad it really was. And I was paying attention, just like you guys were paying attention. And as it got worse and worse, it's like, what other thing can you do except start trying to give it to people? Those people are not solving the problem. The thing that's going to solve the problem is Americans, regular people, the same ones that have now overwhelmingly decided that, hey, you know what? Dudes can't be women. They can't hang out in the locker room with my daughters. They can't go and change in the changing room when my wife is going into a store. And 2 out of 3 of the kids that are starting to move into this, the voting bloc in Gen Z are actually seeing it too. That's how you change it. We have to keep highlighting this crazy stuff. So we're not done yet. We're not even close. It's going to continue on. But I do think that there's a silver lining, which is that more people are starting to remember just how ridiculous it is when you have a contrast of Democrats celebrating George Floyd Day and regular Americans of all variety, independents and conservatives and right and left wing that just think that normal things are normal, looked out and said, isn't this the day when we celebrate those who died to protect our way of life? It has been worse in this country than it is today. And it probably will continue to sometimes be worse on some days. But we're going to be here to call it out. Something that's not terrible is baseball. So we're going to give you guys a little look at that. Before we do, let me just say, if you guys are watching and you have not liked the videos, if you have not left a comment over on Spotify or on iHeartRadio or on Apple iTunes or on Apple Podcasts, please do. You can find us at rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. You can find us at youtube.com/@Kyle Seraphin, where we continue to grow every single week. It's been awesome to watch it. I really appreciate you guys participating in the experiment there. Our locals, we just dropped some stuff on there. Range Day, we're going to start making it a regular thing. KyleSeraphin.com is how you get there. There's some free content. There's some stuff behind the paywall. If you want to support us financially, you can do either one. And I appreciate all of you that do that. And then lastly, if you want to share the show, KyleSeraphinShow.com is a link you can send to your friends and give them Spotify. They can actually watch it right there on the browser. They don't have to take it anywhere else. Check that thing out. Let's do something that's a little bit uplifting. It used to be that sports was the thing that you could go do and then get away from all the crazy. That's not always the case anymore. There's a lot of woke nonsense, like we just showed you that clip of George Floyd. So here's our little palate cleanse of the day. Sometimes the improbable, the awesome, sort of almost proof of the divine happens in a sports moment. I saw this clip. I don't even care about watching baseball. I haven't for a long time. Like, I'll throw a ball with my kid. I'd be happy to do a catch with my dad, like at the Field of Dreams, but I just don't want to watch professional sports anymore. But every once in a while, something like this happens where you just go, how incredible did it used to be in this country to be able to watch stuff where there was no politics involved. It was just people doing some incredibly awesome, high-level athleticism. This is a home run that is on the same exact trajectory. The ball superimposed on top of its flight plan. Guy hit 2 home runs back-to-back in exactly the same spot. And for me, I don't know. I just think it's cool. And it's a good way to start off our Tuesday, like sort of like the great thing that we used to have. Someone showed me a poster, by the way, of the Bash Brothers, Jose Canseco and Mark McGuire. I think I used to actually have that poster. It reminded me that I used to love baseball, so this one did too.
What if I told you this is actually 2 balls flying through the air? 2 fielders chasing it down. That's right. Trent Grisham hit a home run in the top of the 3rd. It goes to dead center. J-Rod's chasing it. It actually is going to go off his glove and then over the wall. In his next at-bat, he says, I'll just hit it to the same spot a little bit farther. No way you can catch this one. Hits the same exact home run. This is stuff I would pray about. Look at the overlay. Watch the overlay. I'll pause it right here. That looks like 1 ball in the middle of your screen on the grass. I'm going to toggle off one of them. Same exact spot. See the umpire and the fielder? Now there's 2. Now there's 1. Nothing is changing with the ball. They're in the same exact spot. That's the one later. Got a little darker. Look at the ball in the middle. Barely moves. They're flying through the air at the same speed, the same angle, the same trajectory. It's incredible. And J-Rod's route was exactly the same. He actually becomes one person right here before it goes over the wall.
How cool is that? Sometimes really cool things happen out there in the world. So this is just our palate cleanse to remind that there's some still amazing capabilities in human beings out there. They just turned out they're generally not speaking in our government. So anyway, there's a little moment of it. I hope you guys have a great start to your week. I hope you had a day off yesterday where you got to reflect on the sacrifice of those that were out there. I know we did. It felt kind of weird in Texas. The weather was wrong and kind of off. And then absolutely pissed rain last night, which sometimes reminds me that I feel like it's tears from heaven kind of a thing, reminding us of those we lost that did support our ability to go out and have amazing moments watching baseball games, which used to be something I used to enjoy. Maybe we'll get back to that in this country, and we're going to do it by telling the truth and being honest. All right. God bless all of you. Look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Have yourself a fantastic day, and stick around. We'll give you to the American Radicals podcast next if you're on Rumble.
Thanks for listening to the Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram @Kyle Seraphin.